So we can continue our session after lunch. So please meet our new speaker, Jani Haapio.
Thank you. So let's get started. Hopefully some people are still coming after lunch. I don't know if it's a good thing to be after lunch or if it's even worse to be before the lunch. So hopefully we're going to get some more people joining this presentation. So my name is Jani Haapio. I work as a channel systems engineer based in Finland, but Baltic countries are also my region. So I'm going to entertain you for the next 30 minutes talking about our zero trust concept and how to extend that from the network to the endpoint, and looking at this from the perspective of also why it's important to gather lots of intelligent data from the endpoint that we will use in security operations purposes to identify what really happened in case you get a breach. So let's get started with the presentation. And in case you don't know our company, we are the biggest enterprise security company in the world nowadays. We are famous for our firewalls, and our endpoint protection is also very popular, plus everything what we have running in the cloud. So looking at our product portfolio quickly, like mentioned, we are famous from our next generation firewall, the network side of security. We also have the endpoint side, which we will touch today. Then we launched a new kind of a product family called the Cortex, which we're going to talk also today, which is part of the Secure the Future side. So we added more capabilities on top of traditional security from the network and from the endpoints. And on top of this one, we do have lots of security solutions for the cloud as well. So for the cloud, we have been acquiring companies rapidly. So for our Prisma public cloud solution, we are actually consisting of 4 different companies nowadays. So we acquired companies and integrated those to the solution. So where we actually also gain traction now for the container security and also for serverless security for development operations. So this is the overall summary of our company and the product portfolio. Let's now jump to the main topic. So zero trust. We are the leaders in the Forrester Zero Trust ranking. And we have the grandfather of zero trust concept, John Kinnervag, working also for us. So he's pushing our product management hard to implement zero trust in all of our products and solutions. So what is then zero trust? We often refer to it as trust but verify, because trust is a dangerous vulnerability that the malicious actors are often using. So today we're going to talk about more why the integrated platform approach is needed for this one. So extending the security from the network, from the firewalls, to the endpoint, and how this should be controlled in a way that you can manage this with the same policy throughout the networks and the endpoints, and how you can gather more information for security operations purposes. So if we do look at our way of looking zero trust. So zero trust can be interpreted in multiple different ways by multiple different vendors and companies. How we see deploying the zero trust? 5 steps. First, you need to understand what you're protecting, defining your protect surface. And this depends greatly what kind of company you have. If you have a flower shop, probably the flowers are something that you're preventing. If you have a bank, of course, you know much better what is the crown jewel that you're actually trying to protect. This is important in the zero trust because it defines your level of security that you need to have. So then you need to understand the transaction flows. What is happening in your network? What are the applications and the users doing? And here we can see different products from our product family that can be utilized in these different levels. Once you understand the transaction flows, how the traffic and the applications, the users behave, then you have to build a trust architecture which consists of multiple different pieces of our product portfolio. And once you have that built, then utilizing our different features to build security policies that enforce the overall zero trust architecture that you have defined. And on top of that, once you have everything in place, it is important to monitor and maintain the network. And this is the main focus of this presentation, is look at the number 5. The first 3 steps often are somewhat covered by companies that they have some kind of a network security, endpoint security, and somewhat in place. But then this monitoring and maintaining, quickly adapting to changes in the network is critical. So before jumping there, let's have a look at these steps in more details. So step number 1, what does it mean to define your protect surface? Like I mentioned, that identify where's your crown jewel that you want to protect, how important that is, and then discover all the different aspects to that. So what is the data, applications, data assets, applications, and services involved for this security premise that you're trying to create. So in this scenario, looking at the medical example, the data is patient's info, and it's utilized by an application called Epic. The device using that application is a medical equipment scanner, and it involves services of Active Directory and single sign-on. How this relates then to the transaction flows is the next thing. So first you need to understand the applications and the users and how your network is built on top of these. So then mapping the transaction flows, what this means. So understanding how these users and applications and devices are talking to each other. So here we have a patient and a doctor, and you have to define to understand what is your data flows. Otherwise it's difficult to enforce the zero trust and the segmentation gateways unless you know your traffic and your users and where they are. And especially if you don't know where your crown jewel is, that's a bit worrying thing. You always have to think about what is the main thing that we are protecting. What is the company asset that has the biggest risk to the business? So then architecting the zero trust network, once you have identified your applications and users, I already mentioned the segmentation gateway. So this is rather simple. Segmentation gateway here refers to a firewall that isolates a segment of the network. So here we have the protect surface, protecting something valuable, the crown jewel. That's a micro perimeter. You assign company-wide policies, like who is able to access this, the users, the applications, the data. Then you use a segmentation gateway to isolate that not everybody can access this. So that's the part of the zero trust architecture defining the segmentation. And then looking at it more from the higher perspective, the policy rules that you define extend also from the segmentation gateway, which is the firewall, to a wider scope. So you might have something in the cloud. Of course, then you have to think about a cloud-based segmentation gateway. And here we come to the endpoint as well. So you need to take the endpoint into consideration in this architecture. It's not just enough looking at it from the network security level perspective. So endpoint protection, EPP, is important. So to have something running on the endpoint, or then using VPN connectivity to get that endpoint data and all of the traffic through the segmentation gateway, which is the firewall, to enforce security policy. So once this is done, these are the basic fundamental things of building security. Then it's the hardest part of monitoring and maintaining your environment. And here we utilize security operations, SecOps. And how we encourage this to be done is that you have, again, this holistic view to your network, whether to the network, to the endpoint, to the cloud. You have to have the consistent policy, ability to configure it, but also to have the visibility to understand what is happening in your network. So here, from this forward, we are continuing looking at it from the security operations perspective, because that's the hardest part. You might have your network security and endpoint security in place, but why do we need security operations on top of that? Let's continue to that. Couple of slides for the reasoning. The attack landscape is all the time changing. This is a nice graph showing like different attacks. Most worryingly, how many different kind of credits have been stolen. So the hackers are hitting harder and harder at bigger companies, breaching them, stealing something valuable, stealing the crown jewels. And at present, we're looking at more automated attacks, which means that the hackers are using easy automation. They don't use any files. It's fileless attack. There's nothing that you actually can trigger point that, okay, this is a malicious file. It's a behavior. So this poses a challenge how the security operations can match this. And why the security operations team or people struggle to mitigate these attacks. So this is based on our research of the different security operations teams and how they are daily operating. First of all, the security teams have many tools that generate many alerts that they need to look at. This is a very common challenge. You get just too many alerts. and you have too little time to go through these alerts, meaning that you will lose the visibility of what's happening in your network. So on this research, on average, it might take up to 4 days to understand what happened after the breach. And here we come again, of course, the favorite topic of GDPR and how you need to report as quick as possible, or within certain time limit, create a report what happened if you get breached. So why this is challenging? I like this picture. It is often a mess like this. So you might get from the news or somewhere else an alert that, okay, you got breached. There is a CSO or a CISO in between, in the middle, whose responsibility is to maintain the security in the company. He or she has to contact multiple places: network operations, IT operations, security operations. All of these teams are siloed. They have their different tools. They don't necessarily talk to each other. You might have a CM solution to gather some logs, but the communication flow is always very challenging. If you're a small company, this can be inside your head, which means that if you're a single person, you're a CISO, you're network operations, security, and IT ops. But you still have to, inside your brain, combine all this information coming from various places. So how this must change? Like I mentioned, because the hackers are using automation more and more, we also need to make sure that the security operations operate in a very proactive way, meaning that they use machine learning and analytics to analyze this mass of data, so that the mean time to repair or detect is much lower, which means that they're more efficient. Because security operations always requires human power to make the decision and make the hard analysis. Machines can do some part of the job, but the idea here is that the more the machines can do the job and raise the important alerts to the humans, the more efficient these people will be, or the more efficient you be as a single person handling all these roles. So more and more rich data and more automation to process that. So coming back to the topic, why the traditional security is not often enough. So looking at the different kind of attacks, I was already mentioning the kind of evolution of the attacks, coming more and more automated, fileless attacks, very sophisticated attacks. If you have your basic security in place, again coming back to the zero trust, that you have your zero trust architecture, you have your firewalls and endpoint protection, and whatever security solutions you have, and if they are configured correctly, human configuration errors are very often causing these breaches. But let's say that you have everything configured perfectly. And for this one, for example, we have multiple tools to help our customers to get the best practices to implement those in their security solutions from us. We never guarantee 100% protection, never ever, simply not possible. Maybe you can get to 99%. There's always the 1%. Always the 1%, meaning that there might be a very advanced targeted attack, low and slow, a hacker group, cyber warfare campaign, whatever. And this is something that is not necessarily targeted for your company. It might be often collateral damage. It accidentally hits your network and hits you in the same. Or if it's an insider threat, somebody gets pissed off to the company and starts to mess around, leak data, cause damage. How you see this? This 1% is really challenging because there's nothing like that you can catch with the normal security tools that look at the data, look at the signatures, look at the malicious files, unless you use some automation and long-term analysis of understanding behaviors and patterns. So this is what we are coming to with the getting more advanced information coming from the endpoints and the network to be able to do this analysis. So with our solutions, we are reinventing the security operations, how they should operate. First of all, thumb rule, prevent everything you can. So here you can use our Traps endpoint protection, our next generation firewall. Those must be first in place, but there's always something that those miss. We're not perfect either, or often it's a configuration mistake by the user. What you can prevent, you need to detect fast and respond. If you get a breach, you quickly need to identify what happened, what was the impact, what should we do next. Here we have the Cortex XDR product, which we will have a look at that, how it will help here. And for very advanced security operations teams like Security Operations Center, we have Demisto, which is a company we acquired that does security orchestration, automation, and response. It automates daily activities of a SOC analyst. but that's beyond the scope of this presentation. So, preventing everything we can, looking at, again, from the endpoint perspective, meaning that extending the security and the zero trust to the endpoint. This is important because more and more stuff is happening on the endpoint. On the network side, it's more challenging to see always from the network perspective what is happening. It might be that the data is encrypted and the firewall doesn't see anything. Or it might be that it's coming from the USB stick, which means that the network security doesn't see anything. So endpoint protection is critical in prevention. So what is the problem here? Looking at the legacy endpoint, everybody knows the kind of the old-fashioned antivirus running in your laptop, and it scans your packets and it slows down your machine and it kind of bothers your work, so you try to kill it all the time. The challenge is again that because the hackers are using automation, it's fileless attacks, there's nothing to scan. If you have this traditional antivirus that's still trying to match a malicious signature and match it to all the files, it will be just very heavy and it will never keep up with the automated attacks. So endpoint protection must be much more smarter than just a normal antivirus. Let's say you have a good protection solution. That might be still siloed, meaning that it has its own user interface and it doesn't talk to each other, which means that every time you get an incident, you still have to go look at that particular tool and see what it will tell you from the network. If you have endpoint detection and response solutions, which are just gathering logs and not preventing stuff, that's also good. But what about the devices where you can't install this? There you need to utilize the network security products to give visibility there. So with our traps, we have the prevention capabilities of prevention, the malware, which means the traditional antivirus. We can block exploits based on technique. So traps is very lightweight because it doesn't need to understand anything about the attack. So we don't need signatures like the old-fashioned antivirus products do. So we look at the techniques that the attack is trying to bypass the vulnerabilities in the operating system. So it's very lightweight, and then it's able to also understand behavioral. And we come back to the behavioral more in the examples that this is, again, analyzing a suspicious behavior that is linked to a malicious activity. So traps can also do that. And XDR will build even more on top of that. So let's have a look at the threat detection and response side. So endpoint protection is important, but like I said, not always perfect. So there's ways to bypass every security product. So if a breach happens, and then again we come to the point where we need to detect it fast and understand what happened. So what is the problem here? Again, humans looking at the attack, so you can't prevent everything. And often, because of the sheer amount of alerts, people don't have time to go through those, and they're chasing maybe the false positives or low context. They're not focusing onto the right alerts. And trying to look anomalies, which means a behavioral differentiation, it's definitely not a human job. Machines have to do this analysis of how users and machines behave normally, to raise a flag that this is something suspicious, this is not normal, please check it out. So how does threat detection work? So, like mentioned, there's typically a human that tries to combine multiple alerts and logs coming from multiple tools and tries to come up with a solution that, okay, we got breached and maybe this happened. So gathering a lot of data and trying to understand that. So, and you might have these point products in all the places to gather the data. So what we developed is that once you have our solution, prevention solutions in place, the network firewall, the cloud firewall, endpoint host protection, we will get this information and we will feed it to the Cortex XDR that has a single location for the data, and we use machine learning to process through the logs and give you meaningful alerts, meaningful incidents to look at. So this is how we detect stuff. Then the next thing is, once you figure out what happens, is how you mitigate, how you contain the threat. So to make sure that it doesn't spread, and you need to clean the machine that got infected and so on. So again, here we have another problem, that it takes too long, again, because there's just too many alerts, and you have to do lots of manual work. So it might be the 4 days until you realize that, okay, it was this user's machine that got infected, and it connected to another user and infected that as well, and so on. So finding the root cause why this happened often takes long. And finding the root cause is important to understand the breach, what happened, and learn from that, and make sure it doesn't happen again in the future. So again, an example of the investigation and response. Often cases, customers use multiple tools: endpoint protection tools, network traffic analysis, threat intelligence, user behavior, and firewalls. Try to get, again, correlate the data coming from multiple locations. So in our case, we get these alerts grouped from our prevention solutions. We feed those to the XDR and visualize what you need to see, and easily you can see that what was the attack all about, what was the breach all about, which means that you can quickly mitigate that. I'm not going to show you a demo, but I'm going to show one screenshot that we do have a working product. I can demo it also down on our stand. So this is how it looks like. This is an example of the breach, and this is what the user interface will tell you. It has gathered already that this is one incident. It involved, on the right side, 2 PCs and 2 French Frodo and Gandalf for the users. So, and we are gathered this information of all these alerts that you see on the bottom, coming from firewall, from traps, from multiple locations. We already kind of processed that for you so that you can see easily what happened here. So here the firewall saw something malicious, but it was not in the block mode. So it allowed it through to the endpoint, which activated the malicious payload that tried to call to a malicious host to download another malicious payload. At that point, Traps was actually blocking that. But now we can easily see here that who are the users to contact, what was the attack all about, and then we can learn from this one and make sure that doesn't happen again. So this is the place where we show you the visualization and the analysis what happened. We can also have it look at on the timeline if we want to understand whether this was a short attack or a long attack. So we can see this on the timeline, how different actions of this attack chain happened. So when the payload was dropped, when it was executed, when data was exfiltrated out, when there was a lateral movement, meaning that the malicious activity or file or process was jumping from host to another. And this is the challenging to see this lateral movement. Just looking at one PC is not enough. You need to understand where else it might have hit or spread. So looking at the root cause, what we will then do, this is pretty cool. So we can already now see visualization from the user interface that without any additional investigations, just looking at the root cause analysis provided by the user interface, we can see that obviously bad guy Sauron clicked on a phishing email, opened a browser, downloaded the zip file, opened the zip file. The zip file has a malicious PDF that actually tried to connect to a malicious host to download more malicious payloads. So now we can go to say to Sauron that please don't click these kind of phishing emails anymore. And now we can also go to Sauron's machine and clean the machine if we need it. So the root cause is very easily visualized with this tool. So key differentiators on the Cortex XDR product for detection and response. So with the product, you will get the full visibility to the network, endpoint, and the cloud. So allows you to quickly identify what happened. And we have the industry-leading capabilities of detecting different kind of behaviors. And we have the machine learning used behavior analytics on the back. So how to kind of prove that we have the best detection capabilities in the market? There is a third-party test called Mitra Attack Framework, which tests the most known hacker techniques that hackers are using, for example, abusing legitimate processes like PowerShell, how they can use those processes to laterally move and potentially prepare an attack that's coming. So techniques, behaviors. This test is measuring how well different solutions can detect these kind of techniques. And we were by far the best, looking at also the other competition, because we cost less false positives and less manual work to come up with the visualization and information, what kind of behavior was detected. So it's a very great result for us, showing that the XDR has truly capabilities of getting the log data not only from the endpoint, but also from the firewall, and that adds a lot of value in combining that and visualizing the different activities and behaviors that the hackers are using in the network. So, as a summary, what we do is, regarding back to the zero trust, if you need to have your network security in place, endpoint security in place, and then this last part of continuously monitoring and maintaining and learning from the findings. So once we get the log data from our solutions, we send it to our data lake, which is the centralized log storage, only running in the cloud. Unfortunately, no on-premise log gathering is possible. So only in the cloud, public cloud, on top of Google Cloud, we run the data lake, and also the Cortex XDR app. That will give you the intelligent alerts, meaningful alerts and incidents. It will group them together for easy visualization. It will show you the root cause analysis very quickly, what happened. It allows you to respond, clean up machines, and make sure that next time this is not going to happen again. So you can customize the rules and make new signatures for firewalls and so on. So all in all summary, what the Cortex XDR does, it makes this detection and response accessible to all analysts. And you don't even need to be a malware analyst to be able to understand the user interface and what it's offering to you. Because when we gather lots of data from the endpoint, you can of course search the raw data, but we visualize the meaningful things for you, which means that you cut the detection and response times, and you reduce the risk of breach because you can beforehand detect behaviors of the attackers that are already in your network, but maybe they are not doing malicious things yet. So we can detect these behaviors beforehand. And of course, it increases your security efficiency, and because you don't need to necessarily have these point solutions to do all this data gathering, you will also get a lower total cost of ownership with the solution. So still coming back to the summary of the 5 steps towards the zero trust. It's not always easy to get through all of these 5 steps. So we have this prevention-based architecture transformation, which helps you to define different levels for your company and for your purposes. Like, we have recommendations where you should start from. Visibility, control, enforcement, finally the integration that we talked about. Everything needs to be integrated together for management, consistent policy, plus the detection side as well. So we have these steps for you to help to get more easily to the zero trust architecture. And on top of that, once you have everything, the prevention in place, then you can build the detection capabilities with Cortex XDR. So that was my story about the zero trust. Thank you for joining. So and how extending it to the endpoint is critical, and how we gather with rich data coming from the endpoint, how we can leverage that information for much more efficient data detection and response. Thank you, and for our customers, I always want to mention the Ignite, which is our customer conference coming in Barcelona, that you can join there and learn more from our solutions. So at this point, I thank you, and I'll be at our Palo Alto Networks booth there for answering more questions and show you demos. Thank you.